Hi, this is Jay Horwitz with the latest edition of Amazing Mets. I Love My podcast. My special guest, the great R.A. Dickey. All right, when I see your face, I'm thinking a magical year of 2012. We know what comes to mind. This may sound stupid. The trips that you, I, and Mike Palfrey went to go to this wonderful yogurt place outside of our hotel in Philadelphia. And you told me how to build a yogurt sundae. I went to spilling all over myself. What do you remember about those days?
Oh, those were some of my favorite days of all time. I always thought that that was the key to my Cy Young year was the way that we built our Sundays together whenever we would go into Philly. So
Which is a novel place. It had new. You can walk around, make your own Sunday. We never was a place like that,
I, I know it. You were captivated by how many flavors were in that place. I
yeah,
remember.
I went back for a lot of seconds. All right, talk about 2012, a magical year, and something else magical happened. In December, especially where you came from. You were one of the 14 new people added to the Hall of Fame ballot. You retired in 2017. And not everybody who retires goes on the Hall of Fame ballot. I did some research. The BBWA selects a panel, and two of the six people have to get you in. After all you went through, we'll go through that a bit later. How does it feel to be on a Hall of Fame ballot after the way your career started?
Well, I don't know if it's just incredibly surprising. I feel like, of course, I think everybody says it's humbling, and I'm certainly moved by that gesture. But wow, I mean, the names that are on it are really names that you look at them and you think, I'm not as good as that person. I'm not as good as that person, and so it's real humbling to be on a ballot with those good of players. But we had a good ride in New York, and so I'm thankful that I performed well enough to even be considered.
See, look at what you did in 2012. You win the Cy Young, first knuckleball to ever win a Cy Young, go 20-6, lead the National League in strikeouts with 230. Your autobiography is published. And I think it was at the end of 2011, you and Dave Racanel and Kevin Slowy, you climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. I mean, could you do anything more in 2000? Wait, you're on 60 Minutes yet. I forgot about that.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you look back at that year and say, this is crazy, isn't it? All this stuff that happened in 1 year.
Well, you don't really realize how crazy it is until you're out of it and you reflect back and you have somebody tell you all the things that happened over the course of a year and a half period. I mean, it is quite remarkable. And of course, I had a lot of incredible opportunities, and a lot of great people helped me along the way. And so it was quite the ride. And winning the Cy Young in 2012, I felt like, I feel like Phil Necro should have won it before me. There were a year or two right there where he was in the running statistically, and so when I won it, I felt like I got to share it with every knuckleballer that had ever come behind me, Tim and Charlie and Joe and Phil. And so it was a real special culmination to a cool
Just
year.
some of the obstacles you've overcome. Your number one draft to the Rangers in '96. You originally supposed to get a bonus over $800,000. Supposedly, the story goes, a doctor saw you on the cover of Baseball America, and he didn't think you had an ulnar collateral ligament, and they cut your bonus down to $75,000. How difficult was that to go on after that?
Well, it put a lot of doubt in my mind. I wasn't ever hurt, and so I thought that there was some kind of mistake. But when I went to see Dr. Andrews, sure enough, he took an MRI and discovered I didn't have a UCL, a Tommy John ligament at all in that right elbow, and I'd never been hurt a day in my life, and still to this day, after 21 years of playing professionally, I've never had a surgery to fix what they saw as broken. But when it first occurs, you start, it puts some doubt in there about who you really are, and you have to overcome that. And it took me a while to get to the other side of that a little bit and really embrace who I was. And it was hard for sure, but the lessons that I learned those first 3 or 4 years in minor league baseball, trying to overcome this label of the guy who didn't have a ligament, who had, agreed to close to $1 million and had it reduced to $75,000. Like, that follows you around, and that's what you're known for. And I wanted to be known for a guy who could really pitch. And so it took a while for me to kind of get over that hurdle and embrace that piece.
All right, you're 21 years at pro ball, 14 years were parts of the minors. A lot of people say, screw it, I'm not going to keep going on. What made you go ahead and plug on?
I just, a couple of different things, Jay. I think the first thing is I'm really stubborn. I think that's one thing. I still loved what I was doing and felt like I could contribute at the highest level. I really never lost belief in that piece or hope. And secondly, and probably more importantly, is, I had a lot of really, really good people and kind people and loving people come alongside me and help encourage me during times when, I was very, very close to thinking about what it would be like to not ever play again and move on with my life. And they helped me stay in it. My agent, my wife, Phil Necro, Charlie Huff, Tim Wakefield, Buck Showalter, who was my manager when I made the transition to becoming a knuckleballer and with the Texas Rangers. He was the guy that helped facilitate a lot of that. And so I had a lot of people who loved on me well and helped me through really, really tough times.
So by 2006, you bucking the Rangers, you go to knuckleball. First start didn't go that great, in a nice way of saying it, right?
How you think?
You give up 6 home runs in the first start, right? And then
yes,
in one inning, you throw 4 white pitches in an inning. So what was Buck to you? Would Buck encourage you along the way and you could keep going and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think the thing that helped me the most is, he gave me the canvas, the latitude to make mistakes and keep getting the ball. He believed, he saw something in me that other people might not have seen at a time in my life when I needed that encouragement. And he gave me a canvas, if you will, to go down and it might not have been in the major leagues at first. It was in the minor leagues, but he gave me a canvas to go paint on and try to figure out how to do this thing that was called being a knuckleballer. And so I would go and I would fail, and it looked ugly and it would be hard, but I would get the ball every 5th day and slowly but surely started to realize what it took to become a good knuckleball pitcher. And he gave me that freedom, and that was a big deal.
I guess you're not surprised what Buck accomplished with the Mets last year. Did you follow it closely
Yeah. I did. And there wasn't, in my opinion, there wasn't a better man for the job. I know a lot about what his attributes are as a manager, and he sees things that a lot of other guys don't or can't from an evaluation standpoint. And, he's able to get that diamond in the rough that oftentimes goes overlooked. It's a big piece of the puzzle. And that's what happened with New York. You had a lot of guys that really stepped in and filled the gaps, or maybe it was a guy that the regime before him didn't believe in, that he kind of believed in, and that gave them what they needed to succeed. And he's doing a good job. I mean, he's a really good manager, and I enjoyed playing for him. But I think the thing I enjoy most about him was just the way that he led me. I mean, he led me by encouraging me and giving me opportunity and having hard conversations, yes, with me when things weren't the way they needed to be, but also gave me opportunity.
So we jump ahead to 2009. You were in transition. You were a Rule 5 guy, back and forth. So the little transaction in December of 2009, I remember Omar coming in and said, we signed this guy, R.A. Dickey. Probably made about this much in the paper that day. Maybe that much. But your first start, you go to spring training, your first start in Buffalo, you give up a single in the first inning, and 27 batters down. Boom. What was that? An immaculate, in a perfect no hitter? How would you characterize?
Yeah. Oh, that was it was actually, Jay, I think it was like the 4th start in Buffalo or so, and I was gradually getting better and better with the pitch. And I remember when I signed, Omar was in Texas when I was in Texas, so he knew me, and I was really appreciative that he gave me an opportunity to come into big league camp. But if you remember, I was the first cut. I was in the first batch of guys to go out in 2010, and I wasn't real sure what it was going to look like. But when I got to Buffalo, I really figured some things out and had that game where I gave off that broken bat leadoff single to right field and then retired 27 straight hitters in a row. It's kind of the perfect game. And that was kind of what put me on the map. And next thing I know, I think Ali Perez got hurt or John Maine might have gotten hurt.
Right.
And next thing I know, I was on a plane to Atlanta to play some catch to get ready for my start against Washington in Washington. And that was the start of my Met career, was 2010 in Washington, D.C.
All right, I know what you're back. Why did you became a cult hero in the 3 years you were at the Met? You think it's because your late age, what you did, the struggles you had before? I think the average New Yorker really identified with R.A. Dickey for some of those reasons.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that. I think gratitude is the first word that comes to mind, just the connection I got to have with a fan base that really understood kind of where I came from and who I was and let me be me. And I think that was real special for me. But I think that the reason that there was such a relatable feeling was that that pitch, the knuckleball, and my journey up until that point just took a lot. There was a lot of hardship in that, right? There was a lot of adversity, and that the average person can really relate to that. That workman-like, punch the clock, grind it out, trying to figure it out, doesn't work. You got to keep coming back. You got to be relentless, just that blue collar kind of attitude. And I think that was one of the reasons that we connected so well. Is I really felt like the New York Met fan base was a real blue collar fan base, and they understood that piece. And we connected well throughout that. My tenure as a Met, it was just fantastic.
In 2012, did you think that was going to be a special year for you?
Not necessarily. I think after late June, early July, when we went through Tampa and that the back-to-back one hitters. I think
Baltimore and Tampa, right?
Yeah, Baltimore and Tampa back-to-back. I thought that there could be a chance, to do something special possibly, but. Dan Worthen was great. He was my pitching coach at the time, and he really helped keep me grounded. And all we cared about was the work, and just keep doing the work. Like every 2 days, we would get on the mound after a start, and we would treat it just like we treated every other bullpen that I ever threw. I mean, there was nothing that we took for granted. We were constantly trying to get better together, and he was a big help for me in that time, just keeping me centered and grounded. And I kind of tried to just put the blinders on, right, and keep trucking. And thankfully, we were able to do some special things that year and got to share it with a lot of people.
I've heard two other things: the All-Star Game that year, comeback play of the year, and do you remember the night when I think I did some secret balloting before. I don't know if I remember I told you or not, but I had a good feeling about the Cy Young, and I think it was 27 of 32 votes. I mean, it was overwhelming. I mean, what was your reaction that night when the Cy Young?
Well, I mean, just even you describing that time, that period of time, like I got chill bumps again. Just remembering what that was like. It was surreal for sure, but I think one thing that was really cool about it was we didn't necessarily have a great year as a team,
right?
And so it was something that was really special to share with the New York fan base. And I kind of was at a period in my career where I felt like, they may be wanting to trade me because they were going to be able to get a lot for me in that moment. And I got that completely. I understood it. It was part of the nature of the business. And Sandy was always great, communicated well. And so I never had any ill feelings or ill will about that. And it was just the most poetic thing to be able to win that award as a New York Met, because that's how I resurrected my career, and that's the place that I got to have that opportunity.
Towards the end of your career, it wasn't like you slipped away. Like the last 6 years, you won double-figure wins. So what made you retire in 17, Ari?
Well, just as an FYI, Jay, I've never filed retirement papers,
You
so
still
I'm still active. I
you're still,
just chose to leave because it was time for me to be a full-time dad and a full-time husband. And I drug my kids and family and wife from, you know, Port Charlotte, Florida to Seattle, Washington, and everywhere in between for 21 years. And my girls were getting older, and there were boys starting to come around that I needed to be around just to double check things. And it just was the right time in that moment. And so I decided to walk away, but it certainly was difficult. And, I still had stuff in the tank. And so, walking away was hard, but it was certainly the right decision for me and my family.
who else hasn't retired yet is Bartolo Colon. If we could form a pitching staff, you would Bart the top of rotation. What do you think of that staff?
Well, that would be like a combined age of 100 years old. So that'd be something pretty cool. I think that makes some good stories for Andy Martino and all the beat writers in New York.
That would be interesting, So I'll keep in mind you haven't retired yet. A little bit about your off the field stuff, Ray. In 2000, was it December or January? You decided to climb Mount Kilimanjaro to raise money for human trafficking in India, right? I mean, you raised $100 grand. You also got 2 great awards: Tony Canigliere Award, Branch Wiki Award. How did that become a passion for you?
Well, it just like anything, relationship. I met a gentleman who was involved with that outreach and spent a number of years just from afar, appreciating it and trying to give to it. When we would give money, we would give to that organization because I really believed in what it did. And it spoke to my story too, like that sexual trauma piece, and to help people that aren't even a social security number get out of a life that trapped in bondage. And, that felt like that was a worthwhile suit for my story that I really connected with. And so I was involved with them for a couple of years, and then had the idea to try to, use the platform to go up Kilimanjaro and raise money. And we were able to raise close to $200,000 and build a clinic right in the middle of the red light district of Kamathapura, India, that would treat and help educate, these trafficked prostitutes that were, all over the place. And so it was very rewarding. But that's how I got connected with that outreach.
Full disclosure, that's what really thrilled with your client, right?
Well, I just think it's just because it was you don't know about something intimately. It's easy to think about the worst case scenario, and really Kilimanjaro, if you choose the right route, it's just a glorified hike. And so I knew there wasn't any danger, but certainly I think they just didn't want anything to happen to their investment. And I certainly understood.
Updates with the New York Times. Remember, you did where you gave them updates on your climb and everything.
Yeah, it was such a great experience. I got to write for the New York Times and kept a diary of kind of every couple of days I'd write an entry. And we had a company that sponsored Toshiba help sponsor me with a laptop and a satellite that I could hook up. Because of course there's no internet, no phones, but through satellite, I could communicate with the New York Times and would write real time diary entries for them to publish. And that was something really fun for me to get to do.
All right. Your book, which published, and you disclosed in the book that you were sexually abused as a youngster. Was it baseball players at that time didn't do that, weren't that open with their private life? What made you go that way?
I think I've done a lot of work, on myself over this 7-8 years. And I just felt like it was time for me to share about my story because, I knew that there were people out there who had probably were experiencing the same feelings that I had experienced up until the point where I told somebody for the first time and got to kind of break down the walls and start rebuilding, things around that trauma. And, a lot of support, a lot of encouragement from people who understood what I wanted to do. I certainly didn't want to, I didn't want to, the only thing I wanted to do is communicate that people weren't alone in it and that there were opportunities out there for help and redemption and recovery. And all the things that you need when things like that happen outside of your control. And I just wanted to be helpful, Jay, really more than anything. And I felt like my story could be helpful.
And you did make the New York Times bestseller list too, with some other thing I wanted to bring out. I look back on your career. I know with the one-hitters and, again, we didn't have a very good team back then. Is there one game that stands out? Was it the game against Philadelphia when Hamels got the only hit, he spoiled the no-hitter? And again, I think it was Tampa where it was a questionable call at third base and they gave David Wright a hit, could have been a hitter and error. Which one of those hit games stand out for you? Anyone?
Oh, man. Jay, when I think back on it, sometimes I think, well, I was able to throw 3 one-hitters, which is pretty neat. Three one-hitters in my career is that. And I think, well, maybe one of those games, and those games were certainly fantastic. But I feel like my favorite game was my 20th win against the Pittsburgh Pirates on the last day of this thing. It's an afternoon game. It was crowded but not packed, but everybody knew kind of what was on the line, and the crowd was really incredible. And it also wasn't, with those one-hitters, things were so smooth. Like I could pretty much do whatever I wanted to do with the baseball those days. And this was a different kind of day. Like it was a grind. And I remember David Wright hit a home run. I think Ike Davis hit a home run. And next thing you know, we were winning 7-3. But I'd given up a home run early on in the game to a guy named Rod Barajas. And we were down.
I think we're okay.
Yeah, he became a Met.
Right.
Yeah. And so we were down. I think it was my favorite game was 1-20. That number 20 is a magical number.
Right, sure.
For a Cy Young, 1. And 2 is everybody knew what was kind of on the line. Like we were kind of sputtering as a team, but everybody was pitching in and behind that effort to maybe capture something that was pretty special. And I felt it from my teammates. I felt from the crowd. I felt it from you guys, Jay. And so it just was special to get to share that win with everybody. I think that's what made it my favorite.
Yeah, me too, Roy. You know what? I enjoyed the baseball part, but stuff that I missed was the dinners and the stuff, the friendships that developed. I mean, that's something you can't quantify, put a number on it. That's really what makes this game really great. To develop the friendships, 10 years, we're still talking. I know Yan, and everything. So that's what makes this game really great.
I agree with you, man. It's the game a lot of times with real deep friendships, but you do come out with a few. And I think that's one of the things I miss the most, or just some of those more intimate relationships that I had with my teammates and guys like you, Jay, and others, where we would get to share things with each other and laugh about things with each other. And those are certainly things that I miss and am hopeful that other people get to enjoy.
Do you want to get back in the game already? I mean, so knuckleball is still not common. I'm sure you get a lot of requests, right, to teach you knuckleball and stuff like that.
Yeah, I do actually. And it'll either be a team that asks me to come look at a couple of guys or ask me what I think about a couple of guys, or it'll be an actual player who reaches out and wants to come train here in Nashville for a little while. And I'm always open, because that's what put me over the hump was, Tim and Charlie and those guys that did it before me were willing to open up their homes, their knowledge, their wisdom around what it took to throw that pitch. And so they paid it forward, and that's what I want to do. Like I know there are guys out there that could really do it. And so I've always been open to people who want to try to learn it and get to a level where it might help them to be a big leaguer. And so certain teams will call me and ask me to work with a guy or two or things like that. Those things have occurred. Yeah.
All right. Next year, we'll hopefully get you back. Have an alumni weekend, come back, and we fit into your schedule with the kids and everything. You're a good friend. I treasure our friendship, and thanks for doing this. I appreciate your time.